Good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Writers Workshop session with Otis, arranged by Indica Books and Indica Academy. And I am Abhinav, and we have Otis, and we request and we invite the writing submissions from any and everyone to share and send to Otis, and then he reviews, critiques, and sends his feedback. And then when we meet on a Sunday morning, US time, evening, India time, we discuss those writing sessions. We have also announced one-on-one, detailed, in-depth writing coaching sessions. If you have a specific book in progress, a proposal that you want to work on, longer pieces that you want to work on and refine and improve, then head over to the Indica website for more details, and you can send in your submissions. Details are available, including the email and other pieces of information. So with that, I will turn this over to you, Otis, for today's session.
Okay. Well, thank you. Nice to see everyone again after a little hiatus. Shri Prada, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, it's fine. Shri Prada.
Shri Prada. Yeah, you sent this a while ago, and we are meeting for the first time since I received it. And are you able to have video?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this piece a little bit. And it's a script. So we haven't seen a script before. So that's pretty exciting. I like the script format. Tell us a little bit about this piece.
Okay, so basically, it was a few months ago. I planned to write scripts. Basically, I'm a student of Ayurveda. I'm studying in India. And I thought, why not make it interesting for Ayurvedic concepts to be told in the form of animations or in videos? So that was a thought. I don't have much experience in this, but I tried. I used to do art. I've been to Indica before, like I was in the Indica conference on pedagogy. I presented a paper, and then I was invited for a symposium. So I'm very well connected with Indica. So that's why I thought this is a good platform to ask. Yeah, so I'm trying to pull up my presentation. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you. So, yeah, I wanted you to present something a little bit about this piece specifically, and maybe just read a little bit of it. You seem you're familiar with writing scripts. Is that right, or is this?
No, I'm not. I don't have any background about writing.
Okay. I mean, it looks great. I mean,
I just read about it and figured it out.
Yeah.
This is the first one I've written.
Right. Yeah, a number of years ago, I don't really work in scripts, but I have the programs and things like that. So I wrote one, and it's fun to work in this medium. I mean, I feel like in your script, I can see that you see what you're doing, right? Did you find that when you were writing it? Was it? I mean,
yeah, definitely. I'm an artist, so I do draw and paint. So that's why I'm able to do that better.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with any storyboard programs?
Well, I took 3D art when I was in high school. In 12th grade, I took not 3D, sorry, 2D art. So there we had storyboards. But not really, because I'm a doctor by profession. I'm studying Ayurveda. I finished it. Now I work. So I'm not into the creative field by profession, but I'm very interested in it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Like I think about it like our creative energy energy, use these hackneyed phrases, but our creative energy in terms of how we can sort of best proceed. You know, like I know with myself, with script writing, it was really fun. And I spent two or 3 weeks writing a short script. I was adapting some Kafka. I thought that it was high time for Kafka to be, hit the main screen. But the problem is I really don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to continue it. So that means that I'm spending, a couple of weeks, in this one particular process, working on something that's a product, and then I don't know the next steps. And those next steps are also things, those next steps are things that I also don't know about. I have, I have this massive learning curve, in front of me. So I think that's a little bit where my thinking is with this script, which I think is, quite, in its way, it's quite professional. I think that if I have a comment about the script itself, it's that it's not really employing some of the strategies of storytelling that we use in order to kind of capture an audience. So the structures of storytelling that we use and, that we talk about here, some would say ad nauseum, is that we have to have a kind of a feeling of, we call it conflict. And I know that can be sort of a troubling term, but basically the intersection of a protagonistic force and an antagonistic force, and that creates a conflict that the audience is interested in what's going to come out of it. So that's sort of the macro structure of story that we tend to work with. So as a critique of this piece specifically, I would say there, that isn't apparent to me at the start, right? It has a kind of, you have this narrator who comes in, and this is also very common for us as writers, particularly when we're just testing it out to start with. We want to be a narrator, a narrator is like the big overarching power of the story. And so we come in as a narrator and we get to create our world, and in a way, as I write in the beginning here, it's the beginning can feel a little condescending, addressing children, and you don't want me to go on. Thank you.
No, I understand. I felt the same way, but the thing was, I thought of keeping the audience as children, school-going kids, so that it could be an educational video, but then I'm still struggling to find how that would be convincing, because the concepts are so complicated, and to explain them in simple terms and still not lose the content, but make it creative, it's a really big hassle. So I have so many topics and concepts I want to do, and to combine all of it, because it's a medical science. Ayurveda is a medical science, and you want to bring it into animation and put characters, because it's so abstract at the same time. It's more like the art of life. It's not only medicine, but it's rather the art of life, the art and science. So it is possible, but it requires a lot of minds to work together. And if I'm doing it alone, it's still going to take me a lot more effort.
Right. So I think that it sounds like an incredible project, right? As you say, a lot of minds, a lot of creative people coming together to create a series. And so, so like if you looked at this piece specifically, you would take out this narrator, in the beginning, and forget that, because that's something you're going to discuss behind the scenes. You're going to be like, well, these are a group of animations that illuminate these various points. for children between the ages of 4 and 10, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to be part of your overarching, you know, whatever you would call that, you know. So like you would be presenting that. It's your establishment of the genre. You're actually trying to establish a genre, but right now, I mean, the way you're doing it is you're putting your foot in the water with just this script, but really you have a much larger project that you're kind of envisioning.
Yeah, I have the whole presentation of the project. This is just one piece of it. It's not a complete story by itself. It leads on to several other smaller scripts. So it's not complete.
Right. So we're really talking. Yeah, this is I find this really interesting because I can see here that you became really involved in the writing. And
I was 3 months ago. Yeah, I was.
Yeah,
now I'm
and
totally into something else because I guess my work started, so I don't have much time for this.
Okay, so you're discovering a lot about being a writer, like right from the get-go. I have to say, it's like, yes, it is. It's, and even this narrator who's coming in, right? When you start writing and you have all this, in a sense, this creative power at your disposal, you know, it's quite intoxicating. But with a project like this, you have to think about stepping back and like actually what you're really doing is making a kind of business plan. And then you have to think about for yourself, do I really have time to make this kind of business plan and to develop the kind of contacts I need to do all the ground, you know, the groundwork that I have to do. I mean, you're talking about a major project. And if you're starting as a doctor, it's like, do you really have that time? We only have so much time in every day.
I know, yeah. I actually had a vacation for 2 months. So that was the time when I sent in the script. So I was very available at that time for 2 months. So I thought I could work on it and at least release like a 5-minute video so that I can take it forward and then look at it at a later time. I thought of like just making my plan straight. So after I finish, I'm doing my internship. So I have to work for a year before I graduate. So I am graduated, but I need to work for a year before I can leave the place. 365 days, it's a count. So once I'm done with this, I can come back to working on this project. So I just thought of keeping a plan for it and setting the seed so that I can do it later.
Right. So the issue here is probably to consider what medium can you work in most efficiently to actually produce something that works as a stepping stone to the largest plan.
Yeah.
It could be a script, you know, but I don't know. Like, if it is a script, where does it go? Who does it go to as a script? I'm much more familiar in terms of writing of, like, let's say, and the way I got my start was I worked on a short story, right? So I wanted to get a short story that rose to a point where I could publish it in a journal. So I knew that the journal structure already existed. I knew what my place was in it. And then I worked on that story and then I could depend on all of that structure. I didn't have to invent it, right? I didn't have to make it. I mean, yes, there's plenty of video structures, but, you know, and movie structures and all of those things, but I don't know anything about them. And I also, like, I basically knew that, well, I can look up a bunch of journals and I can send my story to them and then they will tell me whether they'll publish it or not. So that's it. That's all I had to do. That worked out pretty well. I've also made some animations. I have 2 daughters, and we made these animations when I was a kid because there was a program that we could get. And so we drew the pictures and we told little stories, and they were about 15 to 30 seconds long, right? I loved them. They were stories. They were great little stories. That program already existed, and I put it on YouTube. the YouTube structure already existed, right? And then I could, but
working with what you have.
Right. But if I'm going through YouTube, what's going to make people look at it? Nothing. Right. So, my mother likes it, and, a few friends like it, and then that's it. That's the end of it. It goes into the big morass. So we have to kind of, it's tough when we have creative energy like that, right? And it is intoxicating, as I know. I do much more writing than I do anything else in terms of my profession, right? Because I don't like to do the other things. I don't like making contacts. I don't like thinking and figuring out how to sell my work or do any of that. I just like writing. I love that part. So we do have to do maybe a little bit of thinking of that. And then probably for you, because I do think that this is true, that when we are creative, when we have that creative drive, it kind of doesn't matter what we do in terms of that creative drive. It could be, I enjoy writing scripts. I enjoy making videos. I enjoy writing books. I like all of it. If I step up here, what is my best route, given what I'm already good at, right?
Yeah, I thought through these steps once I understood the complexity of what I have to deal with if I want to make a video. So then I thought, what about I make a comic book with the same idea? Like, we can change it into comics where it would just be a book. The budget would be less, and it would be much easier to do, and less people involved. If you're saying a video, you need animators, you need producer, you need investors, so many people. But this is more simpler if it's just a book. That was another idea I had, because I guess I was completely into this for 2 months, and then now I'm out of it. But then I got a response from you today morning, so I was like, okay, let's look at it.
Right. And I'm sure you could drop back into it or something else if you were to give yourself the time to do that. Because I can tell that you, from reading these paragraphs, particularly the description of these sort of deities or forces that are out in the universe, reading your descriptions of those, I can tell that you see it. That's the thing, that we want to try and get to as creative people. We want to see it. We want to, to fully imagine it. Then it's a question of honing it, shaping it, and then figuring out how to make it into something that take your vision, find a delivery device, and then give it to other people. That's what we're doing. We have a vision, we need a delivery device, and then we have other people that we want to reach. So what's the delivery device going to be? The comic book, to me, sounds difficult because I have no idea how to make a comic book. But I know that other people do know how to make them. And I know you can get programs and formats, and if you can already draw and do things like that. For me, the medium that I know is writing a story. So I think about it like that. But again, when I think of a story, I have a lot of experience with stories. I have a lot of experience with language. I have, I've done the learning curve with writing. I've already done that. I haven't done it with comic books. I haven't done it with film, but I've done it with writing. It means I'm kind of locked in.
But it's good, right? Like you focus on something you're good at and you continue doing that.
Exactly. So I think it sounds like you need to think about what medium. So again, you have the vision. We're just thinking of the medium here, and then to reach an audience there. So what medium, since you don't have a ton of experience, from this, right? This is a script, and so you can make it look like a script, but the storytelling element you haven't arrived at yet exactly. So you do have to do some work with that. But figure out which medium you're going to enjoy working in the most. I think, I picked short stories because all I need is a pencil and a paper, to do it. I didn't need any other infrastructure. But maybe there's other infrastructure that's available to you. Well, I've always actually used a computer, so I've always needed that. But I think it's an exciting idea and exciting work. And so, yeah, I look forward to see, what. So let's get to real world things. So
Yeah.
this I think this is good for everyone to understand and to hear. Finally, when it comes to being a professional writer, so we're a professional writer. Let's say a professional creative person. That means what you're basically doing is you're gambling, right? Or you're driven, or you're passionate, or whatever it is. You're driven to do this thing that basically is not going to pay you any money.
Yeah.
So you have to, and it's not going to take care of your family. It's not going to take care of, doing the dishes or taking out the garbage. It takes care of none of that. So it means that you have to carve out this time from everything else you have to do. You have to think very clearly about that, because and think about how you can do it. Carve out that time so that you can do this thing, this creative thing, successfully. Because doing it not successfully is
a
not,
waste of effort.
Right.
It's a waste of effort. Yeah.
And it's not even good for us, right? It doesn't give us positive feedback to do it badly. So to set ourselves up for failure, that doesn't make any sense. So we just have to think very carefully about it. And think about what are our resources? What do we already have coming in? And you already have some art, right? So what do we have? And then what can we build? And when specifically are we going to do it?
Yeah.
And this, I already joked at the beginning about like the New Year's resolution. So my thing when I started writing was to write 5 minutes a day. That's all. But that could be do any of your creative projects 5 minutes a day. You're obviously going to be very busy and probably even exhausted most of the time. So you need to figure out what can you work with, right?
No, I think based on what you're saying, I could work with writing, just writing, because I have time when I'm on duty. Like there is a little bit of time when I'm free. So at that time, I can't sit and start drawing because I need my color pencils, I need my stuff, and I can't carry them everywhere in the hospital. So I could probably just get a piece of paper or bring in my laptop or my iPad and start typing something. Write short stories.
Right. And I will give you a little warning as a person who's done this, is that you're talking about the drawing and doing the writing. I've had this experience for a long period of time. I do really like creating. I will jump around. So when the work here gets difficult, when the writing gets difficult, then I'll be like, well, let's write a script. Or like when the script is difficult, I'm like, hey, call my daughters in and let's make a video or whatever. So like when the work gets tough, we look for something else to do. Try and commit to what it is that you're going to do, and then take on the issues, that are going to be difficult in the medium. So that said, we're going to have to wrap up here so I can do some of the others. But if we look at this material, if you were to bring this over to a story, it presents some problems. For writers, we like problems if we're willing to work on them. But if we're not willing to work on them, then we simply abandon the project. This piece deals with these sort of universal forces and that are personified into deities, and that's very abstract. It's hard
Actually,
to do.
It's basically the air, the sun and the moon. That's what it is. The names are just abstract, but to you, because maybe that I did not mention it properly, but I think I did. The wind, the sun, and the moon. It does say that at the end, towards the end.
Right. I understand that. So that's not exactly what I mean by abstract, I guess. It's large. Maybe that's another way to say it. So like it's like these things are hard to conceptualize. So in writing, what works very well, so this is typical of writing as a standard, is that concrete language right? That is very specific and detailed, draws the reader. We're actually human beings, it can seem to me, we're good at being focused on something very intently, which you might also find in your work, right?
Yes.
So we focus on things very intently. We focus on poems. We focus on minutia. It's very easy for us to be large and conceptualize something small and concrete. It's very hard for us to see something expansive. So you have some things that are difficult for you to do and to handle with writing that you can handle in some ways better with drawing, because you start drawing the pictures, right? Once you draw the pictures, you've made something small and concrete, right? So
what would be a better way to represent the same concept?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. You have to start experimenting with it. I'm just trying to have you understand some of the problems so that you can think about how you're going to design this. If you think about writing this piece as a short story, to start thinking about some of the problems and know that you'll have to deal with them with the medium of writing. All of our mediums are limited in their way. Writing is extremely versatile, but it does have its limits, and its limits are found in the way that the human mind understands writing. The other thing I would add to this is to think very carefully about the structure of stories, which I have my feelings about this, but stories do need to establish a conflict so that in writing, we need to get the reader to read on, which means that we need to have them wonder what's going to happen. To have them wonder what's going to happen.
That there is a conflict, right? In mind. Vayu causes the hurricane, and the effect is seen on a little boy.
Right, but a conflict needs to be between two things that are going to be set up as essentially equal forces, so that we wonder what's going to happen. The conflict between me and a hurricane is not a story, because I'm going to get trashed by the hurricane.
No. Vayu is the supreme controller. So when he increases his activity, it causes a direct impact on what's happening inside a city. So you see the hurricane. It's cause and effect.
I get that, but I'm saying that in story thinking, that's not a conflict, because a conflict is between two equal forces, a force of protagonism and a force of antagonism that meet. Okay. So that's a conceptual idea. It's very helpful to think of our conflicts like that, and then to realize that we need to dramatize those conflicts, and we tend to dramatize them with characters that are specific and concrete and on the page. So those are some of the limits that we have. So those things are already immediately taken care of when we move to visual, because once you visualize them, then you have a character on the page. But in writing, that's not the case, because we don't have that visualization necessarily, and we don't necessarily dramatize our two characters, our principal forces, as the protagonist and antagonist on the page in dynamic activity with each other. So where this force, that little boy cannot affect the deity, and the deity, can affect a boy, but it's not equal. So that's not a story, because I know what's going to happen. So that's like a base concept that you'll have to grapple with. And
thank you. That's really helpful. Like, that was the answer I was trying to, I didn't know. I felt like there was something missing, but I didn't know that you have to have two equal, the antagonist and protagonist have to be equal. That's something that I didn't think about.
Well, and I will tell you that I've grappled with the necessity of that in storytelling for many years, and I don't like it personally. I like to have more freedom than that, but all of our mediums create binds for us that we have to
the villain and the hero. You have to create that.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for submitting that.
Thank you so much.
And it would be, if you want to work on something like this, it would be great to see some more of your work. If you decide that you're going to work towards writing a story without the visuals, then I would love to see that, in January. I think that's a good, or I know you could talk to Abhinav. I don't know what it might take. If you did something that was comic looking, I would love to see that too. I mean, those comic novels, comics have come a long way.
Definitely.
I think that's interesting if you have the tools to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll work on it and keep in mind the things that you told, and get back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Let's see. Sunil?
Yep, I'm here.
How are you?
Fine. How are you, Otis?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I love the fall. It's great. It gets cold. Let's tell us a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry, I didn't get the last part. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, tell us a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, actually, there's this anthology. There was a Indica meet with the noted Indian intellectual Dr. Paranjpe. So after that, as in collectively, we brainstormed, and there's this anthology which is tentatively titled Journeys Within and Without, which is helmed by Madhavi. I think she's here. She's going to be helming the anthology along with another lady. So
okay.
This is actually my short story contribution to the piece. So this is the middle of the story, so to speak. So basically, this character, Maya, is a neuroscientist. And you've mentioned as in why Spanish, because she's Hispanic. She's a neuroscientist who works in MIT, and Purna Pragna, which actually in Sanskrit translates to complete consciousness. So that's a mouthful. So I've abbreviated it to Puru. He's her boyfriend. So actually, but he's the descendant of Abhinav Gupta, who was a famous polymath, Kashmiri Brahmin who lived around 1,000 years ago. So he was kind of a literary, spiritual, playwright, genius, all rolled into one. So he was like Shakespeare combined with Saint Augustine, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Entire gamut. So he had a disciple who was a Tamilian from Madurai. So basically, the story is he receives a visitation from his dead mother, and post that he learns of a tantra uh, which was lost. So he's a quantum physicist who works in MIT, and his girlfriend Maya Vasquez is a Hispanic neuroscientist. So first they have entered India in Madurai. Now they are traveling from Madurai to Thanjavur, which is another city in the Tamil Nadu state of India. It has a huge Shiva temple, which was constructed about 1200 years back. So this scene starts, they are on a state bus ride. So they are nearing the destination. So these 800 words or so are of when they're actually getting off the state transport bus and heading to the Thanjavur temple, where they are followed by two shady sort of characters. So that is the context for the entire passage. And later on, I'll take them to other places in India, Nepal, and finally to Kashmir, which is the extreme north of India. So it will be a journey within and without, because Tantra, as such, is an aspect of Indian Indic philosophy which focuses both on the macrocosm and the microcosm. That is within and without. So I'm trying to justify my short story contribution so that it conforms, so to speak, to the name they have tentatively selected for the anthology. So yeah, that's the context for this passage, which is part of the short story. So.
Okay. So Neil, this the thing that arises for me to kind of say is like, and what's the story? Which is a way for me to say, like, what is the story here on a character level? So I understand this. I think there can be a danger. There can be a danger in sort of like adopting a kind of philosophical point of view, and losing sight of the necessities that are in a story itself, right? Sort of what I was just talking about the need to have a realizable conflict that, it's the kind of tangible, dynamic activity in the story that makes the reader, I mean, it's so rudimentary, but basically makes them turn the page of the story. Like what's going to happen. So there's a perceivable conflict. There's basically two things that we want to do in the beginning of the story. And in this way, once we've done these things, and once we've made the character commitment to follow a path of some kind, then the story almost takes care of it itself. It's a kind of mechanism. But the two things that we need to do in the beginning is establish a conflict between A and B, antagonist and protagonist, right? We need to establish that conflict, and then we also need to make the reader care about this conflict from one of the points of view. That's the protagonist's point of view. We basically identify with the protagonist, and now we see that there's a conflict, and we identify with the protagonist. And what that means is that as a reader, I basically bind myself to this protagonist, and I get to experience a kind of struggle in the world with the protagonist that finally results in something, right? I basically then get something out of it.
Right.
So this is a dynamic event that takes place. So we might see that just trying to point this out. I don't know. I'm just sort of trying to point out, if we have a philosophy and we basically are just using a story to depict a philosophy, the philosophy is static. It's like a philosophy of any kind is like a kind of truth that simply is static. It's like it exists, throughout the entire experience. That can operate in conflict with what we need to do in the story to make our reader turn the page, which is to establish this conflict and a dynamic.
As an interject, Tantra is on a philosophical, academic level, it's a wholly different ballgame. But it's been used in cinema in India and in stories as a means of the supernatural. So there's a lot of misrepresentation. But in this story, I'm going to be putting them in all sorts of supernatural danger. So that is going to be the antagonistic force, in my opinion, which will help, as in interest the reader to move forward. And what they basically had in mind was an exploration of the temples in India. So I tried to push that in as well. Because
right. Okay. I mean, I don't. So whatever I'm a simple person. So let's just like embrace me as like, you know, you're kind of storytelling fool, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that, you know, the relationship between Puru and Maya seems like a natural place to have, you know, a focus point if you determined a point of view that was clear in this piece between the two of them, right? So one of them is the protagonist and one of them is an antagonist, and we wonder about them. This is a love story. There's nothing more simple or universally appealing than a love story, Sunil. There just isn't. So this is a very rudimentary thing. It is not some like overarching philosophy, and it's not a big thing. It's a very personal thing that everyone on earth cares about, actually.
Yeah, the crux of it is a love story only. So they are supposed to be, in the end, they are supposed to be the embodiment of Shiva and Shakti, which is kind of like the yin and yang principle in Chinese philosophy, which you might be aware of. So the male and female polar opposites. So
okay,
it is a love story in says supernatural and spiritual garb.
Okay.
So,
well,
so the dangers are going to be supernatural, but at the crux of it is a love story.
Okay, great. So all I want is for you to, you know, just incorporate some of the issues that I'm just bringing up things as issues. We always have explanations, obviously, you know, that, you know, as to why we're doing what we want to do. But I think we also need to hear this other thing is like, well, what are the problems here? What are the problems for my audience? The audience wants to be involved. As I say, this is my feeling anyway, that they want to understand a conflict and they also want to take sides, right? They don't just want to they don't want to just watch something from a distance. They actually want to participate in it. So this is something that I've said many times, but you know, a reader does not read to read about an experience. They read in order to have an experience.
Yeah.
And the experience that the reader wants to have is an emotional experience. And this is, we sometimes talk about the emotional roller coaster, but they basically want to feel this sort of intensity of living life in a way that might be even more dynamic and involving than their actual life. Maybe they work, you know, in an office and they do the same thing every day and nothing really ever happens there. But when they read a story, it has these grand pitches and, you know, big feelings, and they get to go along for the ride. That's I think what the reader wants. They want to feel something. So we want to design our story so that the reader will feel something. I'm not saying that you're doing this or not doing this, but not so that we're teaching someone something. Yeah. We might teach someone something, but we don't make that's not the thing that draws our reader through, right, you know, the piece. So I think it's interesting. I mean, I like what you're saying about these sort of supernatural things, but if we go back to what I was saying before, are the individuals in battle with supernatural forces, is that an equal struggle? And also, how do we really dramatize that? I mean, how do we dramatize this other aspect? However, the two characters are very easy to dramatize and to show, and they're very specific and they're very concrete. within a system in which within a larger environment in which there are these supernatural forces, I think that that's quite interesting. I mean, anyway, let's dig into this piece specifically a little bit. Okay, Sunil. For me in the beginning, so I wrote in media res. That's is it Greek? I think it's Greek, but it basically means in the middle of the action. It's a term we use in storytelling, and Western storytelling is very much comes from Aristotle and a lot of other sources.
Yeah,
and I know
Deus Ex Machina, God in the Machine.
Right, Deus Ex Machina.
Deus Ex Machina.
These various kinds of ideas. Now, I think that there's a very interesting conversation to have about the differences in storytelling in Indic philosophy and those that are coming out of sort of the Western philosophies of Greece. And I think that there's actually a lot of connection between Indic and Greek philosophical stuff too. So, but I do think it's kind of interesting. So I'm just sort of pointing out that in media res is kind of a thing that's been, it's basically on steroids in Hollywood, right? But it also makes a certain amount of sense. The reader wants to be involved in the action. They want to feel things, and we feel things through the dynamic action. It makes a certain amount of sense to start that way. So I think it's just a small point, but here you have about 2 paragraphs that I don't know where I am. I don't know what's happening. And I'm just saying, think about starting in media res. And I think that this is advice for everyone. The big point, and I'm telling you, I have wrestled with this all my life. I do not like the demands of story, but I have to understand that they kind of make sense. If you can understand the sense of them, then that forces our hand, even if we don't want to do it. So
actually, Otis, if I could interject, this is the middle of the second chapter. So I've randomly picked 800 words from the middle of the second chapter of my short story. So this is not actually where it begins, because I was just conforming to the rules of what Abhinav has said, as in 800 words you send across to Otis.
I think we don't have any other choice but to blame Abhinav. So that suits me pretty well.
I'm sure it does.
Anyway, so, well, beware when you take out these segments. If you don't start, if it's not, so taking out a segment should have worked out fairly well, because we should have been in the middle of the action, but that's not what's happened. But okay. The next thing with this piece is, if this is in the middle, it's sort of, so in these moments of profound contemplation, Maya couldn't help but think about the visceral allure of flamenco dancing. Okay, so that's, we're in Maya's point of view.
Yes. She's a dancer as well. So she's Hispanic. So she has initially learned Western dance forms, ballet, flamenco, etc. And then because she's interested in India and Indic culture, so she's, in my imagination, she has also learned Bharatnatyam, Odissi and Kuchipudi, which are sort of classical dances of India. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying she's a super nerd, a superwoman of sorts, in my conception, because she's a neuroscientist as well, and she's talented in aesthetics, dancing.
Okay. So Sunil, that's I think that's interesting as terms of her character. We have to be able to understand how that took place. So we do have to you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the story, but you have to have some sense about how all these things take place. She has Hispanic roots. Where was she living? What language is she speaking? You know, does she speak Spanish? Does she speak Spanish and English?
I've written a side story for her. She's from Argentina, and she was labeled freaky in high school, which is she went to as an American high school, so she was a bit nerdy in high school. That is as in the character profile I have had in mind for her. And
Okay.
as in whatever I've read, you don't include the entire life history of the character in your story. So the author should be aware. So I get what you're getting at.
Yeah, right. So you worked that out.
Character sketch for her.
Right. For me, because I'm starting here, right? I haven't read what's come before. I'm learning a lot of things all at once. But the more important thing I want to bring up is actually whose point of view. So in a short story, this is one of the things I think can help us really control our work, but it's difficult to do. It's basically to control our point of view when we're writing a story. So we need to make some decisions about point of view. Basically, point of view is that place, that kind of where the consciousness of the reader, right? The reader is reading the words, where that consciousness is located exactly.
Yeah.
And it moves around, but we want to create a kind of consistency to that point of view so that the reader basically feels secure where they are. Because if it jumps point of view, which we can in writing, we can write a sentence, I looked out over the trees of Oregon. Jack in Russia looked over, I don't know, the Baltic Sea. I don't know, whatever. But like, I can shift my point of view. But for the reader, that means that they're going from one place to another very quickly. And that is not a securely imagined space.
Yeah, I have internalized what you said time and again about head hopping. So, but what I read in other places as well was that you can do one chapter from one character's point of view and another chapter from, say, another character's point of view. So,
yes.
So in this particular chapter, I'm going with Maya's point of view. And most of the chapters, I'm going with Puru's point of view, because he's supposed to be the descendant of the polymath who I'm going to be holding up as a great supernatural literary ideal.
Okay. So Neil, great. I'm glad so you're right about if you're going to do head hopping, do it for chunks, basically. I mean, whether it's chapters or whether it's sections in your book, or I mean, and you'll, if you read genre fiction, you'll see it move around and there will be head hopping. And I look at everything as a risk to benefit ratio. So if you're head hopping around, what's the risk? The risk is that you lose your reader. What's the benefit? That's the question. Is the benefit worth the risk? For me, I am very, very jealous of my reader. If I've gotten them, if I get my reader, I do not want to lose them. So what is the connection then between point of view? So the narrator, the author through the narrator creates the point of view. So we can look at it as like circles, right? So the author is out here, right? There's a narrator that creates all the language, and then that narrator basically focuses us on a point of view. Here in this piece, so try and understand, like I'm maybe excessively fine-tuned to these issues of point of view because I pay a lot of attention to them. Here, when we begin in these moments of profound contemplation, so whose point of view is that?
Maya's.
No, I don't think so.
Actually, the paragraph which came before was she's in a bumpy bus ride in a Tamil, as in the state bus transport. There are bumpy roads much across India. So,
Sunil, wait,
yeah.
hold on, about the paragraph
So
before.
she's actually observing the scenery and thinking about her past in the United States, where, as in some gringo rednecks were torturing her. So after that, she's flashing back into her life, and she's thinking about her life. And after that, this passage comes. In these, she's thinking about the whole gamut of, as in the whole spectrum of issues. So after that, this paragraph comes in these moments of profound contemplation. So it's actually Maya's point of view.
Okay. I'm just going to make this comment, Sunil, and I want you to grapple with it. These words here, in these moments of profound contemplation, suggest you are from the narrator's point of view.
Okay.
When it says Maya couldn't help but think about the visceral allure of flamenco dancing, that's also from the narrator's point of view. That's not her point of view.
I can actually modify this to make it sound more personal. Yeah.
Okay. But these little things. So these little things. Now you said that you wrote most of this already in Poru's point of view, and I can see that. I am perceiving that this is in this woman's point of view, but I am going to suggest to you that right now it's not very convincingly in her point of view. That's so if you're going to write in her point of view, that writing in a character's point of view is a very profound responsibility for the narrator. We, as writers, I think, often do not take that responsibility as seriously as we actually need to. Here, the narrator is actually controlling these paragraphs, right? And really talking about Maya and objectifying her. We're not in her point of view. We're getting a narrator who's objectifying her with a kind of omniscience. To me, so I'm telling you, I'm a very sensitive, artistic kind of person, and I don't like that. I don't like it when I don't like it when the narrator sort of expresses a kind of molding power upon the characters that are on the page. I am a person who is like, the character is sort of supreme. We have to do everything in our power to get the character on the page authentically. So this paragraph, I'm not really in her point of view. In fact, writing a character's point of view, particularly a character who is not like us, Sunil, is the most difficult thing a writer can do.
Right.
We have been completely immersed in our own point of view our entire lives, right? And we've come up with a vision of the world that's based on our point of view completely, and yet we're going to write about another character, and here a woman, right, who is a dancer and is Hispanic and has all of her own backstory and history, right? And you as a writer are going to come in and try and write her point of view. You need to see that as, I mean, I really think that for us writers, this is the supreme responsibility of us to do this with justice, because if we do not do it with that, then we are, I mean, what are we doing? We're taking over somebody's life. I mean, in my sort of weird artistic imagination, and we should not do that. So that constraint of writing in someone's point of view, understanding what we can do and what we can't do in regard to a point of view is important to me. When you're going into her interior, which is what's happening here, kind of, this is actually a narrator talking about her interior life, right? That she contemplates. But when we actually use point of view, we actually go into the interior of the character and write from within, looking outward. That, I mean, Sunil, think of that artistic challenge. The point of view goes inside the character and then proceeds outward. Sometimes it thinks inwardly, but most often it's looking outward. And it sees the world in a certain way and reacts to the world because of that interiority. I think it's a fascinating issue, but I think it needs some work in this section. That's my simple simple thing. And like where I notice it here too is she imagined the gypsies believed to have originated from India, carrying with them the essence of flamenco as they traverse distant lands. I won't attempt to name here, but the ancestor of Puru's polymathic ancestors. So now actually, when you go into her interior, she's thinking about Puru. Kind of. It's like she's being used to give us this exposition. Her character is being used to give us this exposition. And well, hold on, Sunil. Yeah. I'm going to tell you that when I read that, I've left your piece. I am not if I were reading, I am not reading on, because I don't think that that's true. That does not feel that I'm abandoning your work as a reader. If I were, I'm telling you, we have to try to, I believe that you can come up with reasons why you should do this. I come up with reasons all the time why I should do what's easier to do. The most difficult thing we do, and I'm saying it again, is to actually write in someone's point of view. Okay. So I want you to I don't want you to argue with me about it and justify. Yeah. I want you to take it in, how difficult this is, and to really do it.
Right.
Because if you don't, the reader who does identify is going to, and I'm anticipating Abhinav, I am going to leave this piece. Now, it's not saying that Abhinav will leave the piece, maybe he won't, but I will. And there's a reason that I will. Yeah, Abhinav.
So one question that I have, Otis, is that if you look at something like this, right, where essentially, let's take that you're trying to establish some background, some context about the character, and that's why you've put this a couple of paragraphs in, that in these moments of profound contemplation, all the way to to the leaving an indelible mark. Now, if I were, for example, if I were writing this, if I were to write this from the character's point of view, would it not become potentially a much longer piece? And in the interests of keeping my prose compact and not too didactic, isn't it in some cases okay to use this omniscient narrator's point of view?
Well, the problem with having a point of view that's with the narrator is that basically so there is a narrator. I think the narrator should try and remain as invisible in the story as possible. But what I'm getting here is that I feel that there is a narrator. The narrator is basically using the characters to do what the narrator wants them to accomplish. This is I could tell you stories. We'll have to say them for another time. But I don't know even why this is the thing that gets me the most. I don't know why, Abhinav, but it does. And you should have heard me sometimes in my workshops when I was younger. I mean, I very seldom, dress down people, but I dress down some of my peers because of their use of characters, making them little marionettes. So the idea that a narrator comes in and uses a character to give us basically exposition, and I can feel that narrator doing it, feels unnatural to me. It feels untrue. And it feels to me, I don't want to, Sunil, I'm not trying to, pick on you. We all do this, but it seems like an abuse of power. The narrator has incredible power because they write every single word. So what is it that restricts their power? What restricts their power, from my point of view, is a sense of responsibility to the truth of the characters that are being represented. And we could make the argument that the characters are just vehicles for the narrator and the author's grand design. But this is where I get to have a real issue. And I can't explain to you all why I have it. I don't know. It's just always been a thing that I've had for quite a while. So I apologize. I recognize that I'm overboard when it comes to this kind of thing. But I think that the idea that I'm representing, while not perfectly realized even in myself, even in my own work, I can't realize it. But I think it is aspirational. And so I set it out for you, Sunil, and all of you as writers to think about the integrity of this point of view in a character who is real, not us, not some tool for us to use, but themselves. If we can set that as a standard, I think that we're moving in the right direction.
Right. Okay.
That's my biggest rant, though. I mean, it's taken years for us to get to this.
In the interest of time, Otis,
Yes.
I think you have two more pieces, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nivedita, let's. Thank you, Sunil. Sorry, this piece is extremely intriguing, and I really do appreciate the work. I mean, I should say that. So, Sunil, know that when we start bringing the work up to a certain level, then I got to bring out the bigger guns, right? I gotta there's more things I have to talk about. So realize that we're able to have this extremely high level conversation about the deepest aspects of writing because you've already reached that level. Sunil, does that make sense?
Thanks, Otis. Thanks for your feedback. It gave me a different perspective on it. Thank
you. These are the little, so that thing that I just expressed to you, believe me, it's my demon. It's my driving demon I mean, it is a harsh taskmaster that I hold for myself, and that now welcome to my club. Nivedita, let's look at this. Which piece is it?
You're not.
Right, I'm looking. This one? Yeah, tell us a little bit about this piece.
Hi, Otis. How are you?
I'm doing well.
She says hi. Say hi.
Is that your daughter?
Yes, she's grown, I think, since the last time we met. It's been a year and a half.
Yeah. What is your name?
Say your name, no.
Sayuri.
Okay, how old are you?
6.
6. Oh, wow. Okay, my daughters are 12 and 15. I remember 6. They were both wonderful when they were 6.
Yeah. So I'm also told.
They're actually both wonderful now.
Spent somewhere with my dad and my dad has a friend which he met today, and his friends sent the message about me.
Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, nice. Nice. Okay. Shall we, have you read this story? Have you read your mom's story?
Oh, no. I tell her some other stories, but she wants.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I make stuff up all the time. Yeah.
Oh,
all the stuffed toys in her bed have personalities, so to speak.
They do. That is true. Okay, tell us a little bit about this piece.
So my goal actually with this was to write a very simple romantic story between two people who have the same goal but come at it from opposite directions. That was really how I started it. And it has some of my favorite tropes, enemies, workplace. So I just added all my favorite stuff in it. And that was really what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, my basic feeling is that I think with Sunil's piece too, I said in media res, and I think that this should start in media res. We should get the action, right from the beginning. Why not? Since we have the two characters, we have Vijay and who's our central character? The I character. Oh, Nina. Yeah. So we have Nina and Vijay, and yeah, you're basically doing one point of view and the other point of view, but in both of these so far, that both of them are alone, right? So you're.
Hey.
Maybe I would question why you're going to have 2 points of view. So this is it's kind of a quick way to think about it, but basically the way I think about point of view is I basically want to have just one point of view. That's the easiest thing for me to do. So when I was first working on stories, I just wanted to have one point of view, and it was hard enough to try and do that, basically, because I based it on the philosophy that I've already stated, that once you get the reader involved in a character, involved in their struggle, and they're identified with that character, why would I risk losing them?
Yeah.
By going to another character? So like, if I read this story, let's say I read this and I'm completely involved with Nina, right? And then suddenly I'm with this jerk, Vijay, right? And I'm saying that purposely because he is kind of a jerk. I'm like, I don't want to spend my time being in this character's point of view. The guy seems like an abrasive, acrimonious curmudgeon. Sorry, I was just pulling out words there. But anyway, I don't like him. So now what do? I was like, oh, well, I like Nina, and I was involved with her struggle, and I felt sympathetically connected with her. But now I'm reading about this jerk Vijay, and I'm in his point of view, and I don't like it. What do I do? Potentially, I close the book and put it away. Right? The point of view character is the character, this is the protagonist. It's the person that the reader travels through the story with. So in the beginning of the story, the reader commits. They're opening up the book and they're like, this person and I are simpatico, right? We have a sympathetic connection, and I'm going to be able to feel their struggle as my own because of this connection. When I started writing, I just stuck to one point of view. The point of view character, the protagonist in the story, is also the character who will be changed by the events of the story. So the way to understand the plot. So the plot and the antagonistic force are kind of the same, but the plot and the antagonist, they basically affect the protagonist, and at the end of it, the protagonist is changed, right? So they're like this. They go through the circumstances of the story, and then here they've changed. That is the fundamental structure of story. That a character moves through experiences and it adds up to something. We can't say what. It could be tragic, it could be comic, it could be many things, but it adds up to something. So I would suggest that you make a decision about that here, because when we make a decision about the character who's going to be the protagonist, then we also have to make more profound, we have to more profoundly think about why and what needs to change in them, right? What is their issue? What is it that they have to confront? In fact, the thing that they have to confront in terms of the forces of antagonism and everything else, that's all determined by their character. And you are doing some of that here, right? You basically are doing some background work on her character, and she's a person who's kind of defined by this idea of keep moving. Right?
Yes.
So yeah, when the shit hits the fan, you either stay there, or you get the hell out. And her attitude is to flee, right? And this is not totally uncommon. So given that that's her character trait that you're giving her, what is it? Where does she have to arrive to? We can already tell. And that is a decent shape for story.
Right.
If Nivedita, if you add Vijay's point of view, he also has to change.
Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Right now, he's kind of a jerk. What change is he supposed to have? I don't know if Sunil is still here, but where Sunil had a problem writing a woman's point of view, I will point out that you also had a problem writing a man's point of view.
Yeah, I really struggled with that, and I think it shows. I really struggled. Yeah.
This is not easy for us. Okay. I've had my own experiences trying to write a woman's point of view, and I was told in no uncertain terms that I failed at it. Okay. That's again a story for another time, but it made me, and I've also seen other people fail at writing points of view that are too divergent from their own, where they start making the character, well, what they do is they objectify the character. I think the thing that's true of us in our experience is that we do not really objectify ourselves, but we do objectify others. And so when we write about others who we might objectify, we actually write about them as objectified.
Right.
We can't do that.
Yes.
It's not true, because a character in their point of view is not self-objectifying.
Yes. They don't think of themselves as jerks. Sorry.
Right. No one thinks of themselves as a jerk.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yes.
And no one is motivated. So like Sunil's character, his character was thinking about the guy, and your guy character is thinking about the woman character, right? Vijay is thinking mostly about Nina. Who the hell is this Nina person? That's basically all Vijay is doing. That's not how I don't think that that's really accurate. I mean, at times, but that's not our core. Our core is what? Insecure, frightened. We have fear of judgment. We have fear of failure. We have all these fears, right? That's much more where we're at, and then we're motivated by those things to do other things, right? We're motivated by our fears to do something else. So we need to capture that if we're going to do it in their point of view. Now, that doesn't mean, so we notice that we give ourselves a big break, however, if we let's say Nina walks into a room and Vijay says, "Oh, it's you again." Right? So Vijay is being a jerk, but we don't know why he's being a jerk. We're not in his interiority, so we don't know why he's being a jerk, but you will have to know that he has some kind of motivation. Nivedita, you talk about the tropes, but that trope of like actors are like they're playing like a stuffed dinosaur in something, and they're like, "What's my motivation?" That's a good question for all of our characters. What is our motivation?
Yes. No, I suspected that Vijay's motivation wasn't strong enough, but in fact, I sent this to a few readers before I sent it to you, but nobody raised that, so I sort of got very...
That's why I get the big bucks. Yeah. It's a certain, you need to have a certain sensitivity. So the thing is, and it's true in Sunil's piece, and it's true here too. If I shared your bias, I might not notice, right? Let's say but I don't share. Well, let's say I've trained myself not to share bias, right? And that means I have to really, and I've trained myself that way because I've also employed it in my own work. When I say that, like, I take it as a big responsibility if I'm writing someone else's character. So now if I take that responsibility, I have to wash away my bias about that character and see them as a deeply significant human being, just like myself, and apply exactly the same rules. So that means I can't have any bias. There's some bias here. It's just it's a thing for all of us. We have to work through our bias, and we have to be impelled to do so. Yes. But I kind of want to repeat just for everybody that you're not escaping having to deal with your bias in regard to other characters simply by not writing their point of view. If they're on the page, we have to understand them fully. Do we always put in all the work? Not really, because we can't, right? We have a clerk in a store. We can't do all the work to figure out their backstory and humanize them. We can't always do that. But we have to know that they are fully motivated for themselves. They do not serve the plot. They must serve their own motivations, right? So, and what we do as narrators is we simply bring these characters together. We cannot manipulate them like marionettes to our purposes. And that's maybe another reason why we talk about in media res, because we get the thing started, right? We get the plot started before our reader has time to even think about whether it's plausible or not. So everything is very coincidental. I used to say this, like, every character has their plot. Every plot has their character. It is a coincidence that these two things should come together, but when they do come together, that is a story, right? The protagonist and the antagonist are destined to confront each other, move through the course of the story, and come out the other side. So I think you have a very intriguing start here. I think you particularly, you have this character trait. It might be a little bit too simple at this point, that she simply flees. That might be a little too simple, and I hope you'll delve more deeply into it as the story develops. I would not write the backstory first. Right. I would start the story.
Yeah. Okay.
And this was advice that was given to me once. Only write backstory when you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
The thing is the character's backstory is always apparent in their actions because we've been formulated by our backstory. So we don't need to write our backstory, but we need to accurately depict the actions of our character in the present. So that said, you should think about the character's backstory. You should make sure that you know, so she's not just, right now you have her, the shit hits the fan, she flees, right? That's kind of knee-jerk. None of us are knee-jerk in reality. We've learned things as being the best strategy for our survival. It's just that we apply them, inappropriately as time goes on, right? So we're always fleeing and we're never sticking around if that's what we've done.
Okay.
But I think it's very intriguing, and I'm excited to see how this story develops. I like the arena you have, but this sort of corporate world. But beware, it's not very interesting. So you have to figure out how to make that corporate world interesting. It's Sunil wrote about this temple, right? That environment is very interesting. A corporate office, if you had it in a movie, it's like not very interesting. So what do you do to make it interesting? We as writers, we have to understand what our problems are in order to try and solve them. So I offer that to you too.
Okay. Sure. Right.
But yeah, I look forward to seeing this, and I mean, if you map this out and you control it, you'll save yourself some time. I mean, that's what that's sort of my usefulness, right? Is to try and save you a little time. If I wasn't involved, you would eventually come to all of these things. All of these things I'm saying, you would eventually come to anyway, just through grappling with the work. That is true. I'm just trying to save you a little time. If you can step above and have a little time, say, I must start in media res. I must take the point of view. I must confront the character with things that will eventually change her, right? Over time, after a duration of struggle. That will save you hopefully a little bit of time, and we'll see this completed story, let's say, by January.
I want to. I have been working on the story for 3 months, and I actually did write. I have a version with only Nina's point of view. I included Vijay's point of view based on another reader's request. And I really liked it, but maybe it doesn't belong in the story. It belongs in my mind or outside of the story.
It's just, yeah, I mean, that could be. I mean, you need to explore them. And so far, and in terms of that point of view, I don't think you actually have explored his side of the story deeply enough yet. So that's work still to be done. And it could be that the reader is asking for that because they did not understand the character's motivation as you depicted it before.
Yes, yes, that's how I should have interpreted that feedback. I took it literally.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's so interesting. I mean, you are obviously working on a certain level, like Sunil's work, right? And we're talking about this at a very high level. I like the level of this discussion. So.
Yes. All right. Yes, 10th December is too soon. Yeah, I would have liked to hit that line.
No, I know it is too soon. Well, you could write we could at least see the new beginning, the new immediate race beginning.
Yeah, we can try.
Let's see those first couple pages, and then also shoot to try and get it done. Try and contain yourself. Yeah. 12 pages, 14 pages. Let's get this story finished.
Yes.
And then, because once it's finished, then there's other things to talk about. You'd be surprised that even a story that's completely drafted, I'm going to have some things to say about. That's a joke. That's a joke, because clearly I will have things to say about it.
Sure. All right. Yes. But first, yeah.
Okay. I better move on, or else Abhinav's going to reprimand me again.
No, but this is great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for submitting it. I appreciate that. And I think that I only have Sri Charan's piece, and I don't see him actually here. Abhinav,
He was there, I believe. I'm not sure if he's...
Oh, wait, sorry. I do have Madhavi. Sorry, Madhavi, you sent a piece early this morning, so let's knock this out. And we'll do a quick... sorry, Madhavi, if you're going to get sort of short shifted here, but...
Hi, Otis.
Hey, how are you?
Fine with it because I was not supposed to send it this late. So I'm happy enough that you picked it up today.
No, you weren't. But luckily, Abhinav scheduled incorrectly, and then we were meeting later, and so it all worked out. So I was able to give it a quick read.
I'm glad I'm getting a feedback today itself.
Yeah, but much better than waiting until January.
Sure.
So, Madhavi, this is also very high level work, right? I mean, this is I like what you're doing here, and it has a lot of economy, right? You have a relationship that's already been established by a backstory. So there's been a fiance who's died via this accident, and then you have this event takes place where the who would have been the son-in-law comes over to see the mother. The mother is mourning basically, but we don't know that. This is a very high level piece of work.
Thank you. This piece is actually part of the anthologies Sunil mentioned earlier. So this is the starting of the story, where essentially Vanshika has lost the will to live. So her would-be son-in-law, he is her past student as well. So he takes her on a trip, and she undergoes a spiritual journey also. And she comes back to life, essentially. So it's her journey of healing that I want to show through the story. Yeah,
okay. So it's interesting. I think we sort of, I mean, stories always have the same issues. And I think we'll just dig right in for the sake of time. This opening, again, I would like it to move faster. That's all. Okay. And I mean, I think that really, so I write here that you're just sort of warming up. Right? You know, there's things that I like. You know, there's this mantra. I think it would be great to actually hear that if you, were to translate it for us. Let us know the languages, right? I think that would it be in Hindi?
Sanskrit.
Or what? Yes. In Sanskrit? So great if we had that. I mean, I'm a big fan of other languages in work. So I would even maybe like to see the language, because I think seeing the language communicates to me the almost the mystical lack of comprehension I have of it. But I would also like to know it in translation because she understands it, right? So she understands what's being said by it. But that's just a small point. I could see that happening, but there's a little bit too much time. I would try and make this a little bit briefer. She has a little yeah, I just have a couple of comments. She gets out of bed slowly. I really encourage you to cut out all your adverbs because adverbs have to be coming from the narrator. That's the narrator basically intruding on the text very subtly. And I would just get rid of it. Just let her get out of bed. You know, let her move along and do what she does. She's not thinking about it. She gets out of bed finally. Just make it a little quicker. The thing that is consistent is, so I'm bothering Sunil about his depiction of this woman. I bothered Nivedita about the depiction of this man. I'm going to bother you again about the depiction of the guy in this story. I'm not sure that I understand why he's so good. Okay, Nivedita's guy is bad. Okay, this guy is so good. I don't get it. I mean, he's also, suffering. and it's a little bit hard for me to really understand. He's almost saintly in his depiction here.
One thing probably that doesn't come feature in this particular piece is that she's a cancer survivor. So he goes out of his way to kind of support her when her doctor is not there anymore. So that is probably his motivation to be happy in front of her. That comes through in the story as well, that he is mourning in his own way and what he does when he's not around with her.
Okay.
That part also figures, but it's coming in a little later because my focus is basically this lady.
Right. I get that. I get
so how much of that I should write? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that you have an explanation, and I'm just going to say maybe. So
okay.
I think I try and look a little bit deeper for motivation. You know, I mean, to me, he might be a person who lost his mother, for example, right? So on the outside, it can be like, you know, why are you over here? Why are you taking care of me? We can understand that, but if we understand somewhere, you understand in his backstory that, you know, he wants to care for someone, or he's afraid of losing her too. Something, you know, that's about those kind of real human connections. I don't believe that people are just mean and bad, but I also don't believe that people are just good and wonderful either.
So his motivation doesn't come through, what you're saying.
Right, exactly. So you just, we want to get that a little bit. And then let's see if there's anything else. It's just that start to get it moving along. When you have things like this, and so if anyone believes that I'm not absolutely obsessed with point of view, here's a thing. Do I need a reason like that to visit my mother? Vinod asked mischievously. Who thinks that, Madhavi?
Okay, wrong choice.
Is it Vinod? Is it the woman? No, it's neither of them. Vinod wouldn't be good, you know, because that would be head hopping if it was Vinod's point of view. It's the narrator thinks it. So I think about this so subtly, right? And I think about it all the time. When I get my reader involved in my piece, I do not want to let them go. What is my risk to benefit ratio? The risk of including this narrative intrusion of this adverb is too great, and it achieves nothing for me. I mean, when I look at it on the other side, and I can understand people might have a different aesthetic than I do, but I'm like, it achieves nothing, and yet I risk losing my reader? No. I only do things that continuously draw my reader in and hold them. That's what I want to do. That's how I spend my time. So this here, when I get this, yes, because I'm not your mother, I'm your dead fiance's mother, she replied. That is quite harsh, right? And so I just wrote, this is complex. How are we to understand this? And I write this comment, it feels rhetorical. What that means is that we as writers, we can write anything. But we can't write anything because it will feel like writing. If we write anything, it can feel like writing. And once it feels like writing and not reality, that pushes the reader out of the story. So I bring it up. I mean, again, Madhavi, and like everyone else, our conversation is extremely high level. So I want you to appreciate that about your own work, that you're bringing us to this very high level. The issue of it feeling rhetorical, like writing, is another issue of point of view, if you can understand it that way, because it makes me think about the writer. I'm basically, I'm like, this is too harsh for human beings to be like this, but it's not too harsh for a writer. I'm suddenly pushed out of the story and I'm looking at as writing, because I cannot emotionally accept something that it doesn't comport with my emotional thing, you know, which I'm imagining is sort of shared by a larger number of people. That's what I do, right? I imagine that my feelings are like other people and that the harshness of this pushes me away. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but you need to prepare the reader for it.
Okay.
What happens now with it is that it shocks me and it pushes me out of the story. If you prepare it, right? There are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways that if you watch movies, if you read stories, it can be less obvious. But in movies, it's much more obvious because they have to be far more economical. But there's ways that they do it in movies and they do it in short story writing. They call it foreshadowing or something like that. But you basically set a mood or a tone that allows the reader to understand that something very traumatizing and tragic has happened. Like on her way walking to the door, if you were shooting this as a movie, she might be walking towards the door. We'd understand that she was walking this way. The door would open and show, you know, this desk. And on the desk would be a picture of the daughter. And as the mother was walking there, she would turn the picture so that the person opening the door wouldn't see it, right? Something that clues me in that something terrible has happened. I'm just making that up off the top of my head. I'm not saying it's good. I don't think it even is good, but that you have to think about how to prepare the reader for something that's as difficult as this, right?
Okay.
Because you don't want the reader.
But quite late.
Yeah,
I understood.
It's a very subtle thing, but this is the kind of subtlety that I really try to take care of, because again, it is very precious. If you get a reader, you want to keep them, and you want to keep them as closely in your story as possible, because the closer they are, the more you can make them feel. And so, again, risk to benefit ratio, the risk is that you push them away and you lose them, and then they're not going to feel what you want them to feel. So I'm always thinking about that, and I'm always taking care of the reader's consciousness.
I actually wanted her to push him away, be harsh with him, and not encourage his visits like that. But probably is a bit more over the top.
Right. Well, I understand that she is pushing him away, and I particularly I can understand that, but it's too much all at once. I mean, what it does is it pushes me away, right? So she's effective. What you want to be like, writing is very it's a very subtle activity. You want to bring the reader into a situation that is difficult. But you want the reader to feel safe. That does not make me feel safe, right? I don't feel like I'm not prepared for that level of emotion. I'm not prepared for the harshness of this mom in pushing this kid away. I also don't really understand why he's there, or how or why he can accept that. So it brings up a lot of emotional problems for me. And now that I'm involved in my emotional problems, I'm not involved in the story's problems, right? So, but yeah, I think that this is coming along very, very nicely. I think my main thing is to really pay attention to that point of view. You have a great story here. There's no reason to try and enhance it with these little flourishes of adverbs or excessive adjectives. If you have a great story, let it shine through. And then I feel like I need to understand the boy's character, this young man's character, a little bit better. And it's not that I need to know his backstory. I need to understand him in his actions. So that means you need to really understand his motivation. And sometimes it's just a line. It's like, sometimes it can just be a line like, I know you don't want me here, but I was just passing through the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. So we can tell that there's something else going on with him. He acknowledges that. He's not just, Dudley Do-Right, as we like to call them here. But it's a fantastic start.
Thank you so much. We'll tweak it and maybe share it again once I have it again.
Yeah.
Otis
one more request.
Online.
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Request? Otis, I haven't received this story. Would you please share it with me later on?
I will, Madhavi. You sent it to me just minutes before this meeting. So thanks for giving me enough time to send it back.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. A little bit like the US President Richard Nixon. Won't have Otis to kick around anymore. Abhinav, that's it.
Do you have Sri Charan joined? He was not he had joined earlier, but now he's a panelist. Do you have his piece?
Oh, yeah, we do. Okay, we're just going to push through. Isn't it late for you already? Sri Charan.
We can do a short.
Okay.
You can do a short review, and we'll obviously be meeting on the 10th of December.
Yeah. Okay. Sri Charan, let's talk about your piece quickly.
Yeah. Hey. Hi, Otis.
Okay. So this is another. We're really focused on point of view today, Sri Charan. So I'm just going to jump in quickly.
Yeah.
So the thing that I wonder about is that the style of this piece feels archaic. Now, I understand that this is, so I don't have a good answer for this, Sri Charan, because, I would have to think about like reading something that was placed very far back in history. And nothing's coming to mind right now. But it's like the sentences, so we have a couple different things. We have a narrator, right? And then we have these characters who speak, and then we have issues of point of view. So whose point of view is this story? Where are you going to situate the point of view in order to capture and hold the reader? I do think it's important to think about that in order to capture the reader and not simply be aloof, like we're writing about history from some great distance, but to actually draw us into that history. But that aside, I feel like the narrator gives us information about these mountains and the environment, and it's written in a kind of archaic style. So the question is, why is it written in an archaic style? Like, why is the narrator writing? So what I tend to think is that the narrator should be someone who we don't notice at all.
Yes. Does it feel like an archaic style throughout the piece, or in certain portions? It's because while I'm writing, I did not really notice that thing.
Yeah, right. And then I think you need to think about whether you want these characters to talk in an archaic style. Like, already they're going to be talking in a different language, right? So they're going to be talking. They're not talking anything like the modern reader. So what is the advantage to having them talk in a way that sounds old time. It's like it's not even archaic because we don't even know what the archaic sounds are, but it's our way of making a style that sounds kind of archaic and old-timey. Like, is there an advantage to that or not? Or should the reader, okay, I'm going to, Sri Tran, I've said this before, but I've never said this in Indic. So my feeling about style is that style is like, it should be like a pane of absolutely clear glass through which the reader envisions a world. Okay, so the style should not, the style, my idea of the best style is like, it has no style. Like the reader doesn't notice it at all. They don't notice that it's like, oh, it's so beautiful. This is, when I was in the workshops, this was considered, to me, this is a truism. If someone said, I love that line, blah, 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 it means you have to cut it. Because they basically were thinking more about the writing than the story at that point.
Yes.
Our style should be like a clear pane of glass through which the reader experiences the story. And here there's an abundance of style, and it's preventing me. It's keeping me out of the story. It's like a very muddy pane of glass. You know, it's like I'm looking through stained glass, and I'm having a lot of trouble, like really immersing myself in wherever it is that you want to immerse me. That's my main comment on this piece.
Okay, that is interesting because I did not deliberately do that. I mean, the style you were talking about, that was not really conscious. But when you pointed out the words, I went through them, and that looked like it was done too much, because I don't know, I did not really make the choice consciously, but maybe while writing it came, I don't know, subconsciously or something like that.
No, I know, because that's the way you feel it. I mean, yes, you're right. I mean, the way we write is always depicting our subconscious, actually. It's so funny, like, Nivedita, for example, she thinks that this boyfriend is a jerk, right? Or the person who will be the boyfriend is a jerk. And, that's a subconscious drive, right? We as writers, we have to understand ourselves in that regard, understand how we have our vision. You're going back in history, and when you go back in history, this is how you hear it. True. Now you have to come up to be like, but what is the best way for me to write it? Now we want to start to merge our control over our writing skill or whatever. We want to have our control over our writing and our vision begin to merge. And that has to be done at first, from the writer's point of view, consciously. We have to start to consciously be, say, for example, writing in a clear style. Writing in a clear style is a good, I think, a good bar to draw for yourself. But that's according to me. I mean, you might have arguments for why, everyone has an argument for doing what they find easiest to do. And so you might have an argument for, that was a little joke.
But still, the point you raised, like, what is the advantage of having such a style, like, let's say something archaic has flown into the dialogue. I mean, doesn't give it certain authenticity to the dialogue of how people used to talk in those days? Because there was a movie called Witch, where they specifically used the 16th century dialect and dialogue throughout the whole movie. I mean, that movie is good, but still you can notice that style and everything you have said. We can, rather than focus on the characters, we actually do focus on the environment there.
Right. So that's very interesting, right? So like if we think about a movie, so let's say we make it Shakespeare, right? So it might have Shakespearean language, or it could be older, it could be in Old English or something like that.
Yes.
And people could talk like that.
Hmm.
But in a movie, right, the shots, when you saw a castle, it wouldn't be called a castle. You know, it wouldn't be called something like that. It would be a castle, right? So they rode up to the castle, and someone said, "Forsooth, you know, what hail ye?" Right? So
Yeah,
the castle is still just a castle. It's not a castle, you know. It's not spoken with an accent. Some
yeah,
fancy
I mean,
British
now that
accent.
you point out in that movie, they use these words like "thee," "what do thee," like that.
Right. So, and I will just say that usually a little goes a long way.
Hmm.
What I think is more for me, what's more important is to write clearly, but to actually get the point of view right. Because I think the real thing with when you think about, you know, a more archaic mind, is that the person thinks differently. To capture that is, I think, much more interesting than to create what I think is actually a barrier. I mean, our language should not be a barrier for the reader to get to the story. So let's make that our, I mean, we do not want to push the reader away. We're talking about this all the time, but our language should not be a barrier. It just needs to be a clear pane of glass.
Yes.
And then we want to think about what are the risk to benefit ratios. If we look at your movie that had that archaic language in it, it's like, did it work, or did only 40
Well, it
people go
worked
see
for
the movie?
me, but I don't know about others.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes we as artists want to push the envelope, but we want to do it very intelligently.
Yes. Yeah. And one more thing, like you're talking about the POV here, right? The POV problems in the story. So I tried to put a distance, like to maintain a kind of narrative distance than to go through an intimate dialogue here. So
Okay,
that is just
so
an experimentation because I was going through one book, Self Editors, Guide for Writers. Kind of, I forgot the name, but in that book they talked about narrative distance and narrative intimacy. So this is
yeah.
kind of an experiment in that.
Well, it's a great thing to think about. So they talk about distance and intimacy. Those are the words that they use.
Yeah.
So I think about it like that, closeness or distance. So I also think about it like that. Well, if this were, so for me, if I were deeply embedded in a point of view and I knew that this was the character, my protagonistic character, then I might leave that to have a dialogue, right? But I would not want to have point of view elements within that dialogue that did not correspond to my established dialogue, right? Because how does that make sense? That means I've changed the point of view. So if the king, Divodas,
Yes.
Divodas, so if he's the point of view character, again, going back, I said to Nivedita, the protagonist is the person who's going to be changed by the events. We have to understand that this story structure is basically, we can't do anything about it. So we have to deal with that. So we want the reader to identify with the character who's going to be changed, because that's what the reader gets. They get the verisimilitude of the experience of the character. That's what they get to take away from the work. If you've established that point of view, I would not then go into this section of dialogue where I abandon it, where I create a different point of view, this narrative distant point of view. Why? It doesn't mean that I have to be deeply embedded in my character, but I want to still be seeing things from his point of view. Means I take that point of view, the camera, and let's say I put it into my head. That means I see this way, I hear all around, I feel things that touch me, and I do not feel things that don't, right? I don't see things behind my back, but I hear a snapping twig and I turn around and see the monster, right? So that's the way point of view works. It's like a camera. Why abandon that camera if we've established it? That is a risk to benefit ratio. There's a risk that I'm going to lose my reader. They're not going to know who the point of view character is anymore, who they're supposed to care about. but there's the benefit of what?
Information, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's very interesting because we're all trained by Hollywood at this point. We're all trained by movies, and movies always have an objectifying point of view, but they frame the central character, but then they often break away to other shots, right? And all of those other shots are not in the point of view of that main character. Writing is simply different. We are able to go, the main thing that we're able to do that the movies cannot is that they actually have the first person point of view, which is pretty incredible. We don't have to just use that, and we can have distance and we can do a lot of things, but we also probably want to use it too. And it's pretty crucial because that point of view, that first person point of view, is in writing, that is our frame to a large extent. That's our shot. I don't know, I got lost there a little bit with the metaphor, but you'll forgive me, I hope. Any questions, Shreem?
No questions. Like the questions I asked about POV and the style you mentioned, I think those are very useful to me. Like I'll try to be more conscious while writing.
Yeah, and do it. So the thing is, sometimes, so when you're talking about the closeness and the distance, like for example, let's say you were experimenting with having more distance here. So you can add this terminology. So if you establish the king as the point of view character, and then you move into the dialogue, that's fine, but you don't have to violate the point of view, right? So that means that within the dialogue, you offer another point of view because you just simply don't have to do that. We're in the king's point of view. Now we move into a distant point of view where we just get the dialogue and we're not getting all these incidental details. Is that a good idea or not? I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm not trying to speak to that. But if you violate the point of view, like for example, it's possible to see something that's behind the king, or it's possible to see something that's over the mountains, or what have you, that creates the problem. So it's not always just an issue. Once you have an established point of view, you can also think about violating that point of view by doing that head hopping, by doing that, by using point of view in a way that's incomprehensible for the reader. So you can think about it that way too. And it's not to say that maybe there's not a reason to violate the point of view, but we want to think about it.
Yeah.
Beauty. That was a very high-level conversation today.
It was good to be back, and thank you, Otis, and thank you everyone for joining. As I said, we're going to meet again on the 10th of December and the 7th of January. So be sure to send your pieces in, and as the day gets closer, do send Otis a reminder if you have not received feedback. And we will see you in a couple of weeks to begin with.
Okay, great. Well, that will be, so we're going to meet in December, and then we'll say Happy New Year. Okay.
Right.
Beauty. See you then.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.